Say, aren't you, a couple years late in making a video about Undertale, Deventerous? Yeah, I might be, but it's never too late to talk about the things I like, and I like Undertale, so, yeah, this is my Undertale video. In most RPGs, what does the main gameplay loop look like? Talk to people, you fight, explore an area, fight again, talk to more people, and the game is over, right? Something like that. In Undertale, you don't talk to people, then fight. You talk to people, then you go over their house, have a tea party, vibe out with a ghost, you race snails, and then you try not to die. Or you kill everything and everyone in sight with no remorse, no guilt, no conscience, only bloodshed, grief, and violence. But really, it's up to you. One of Undertale's biggest appeals isn't that you don't fight all your enemies, but rather you have the choice not to fight them. I mean, come on, why beat the shit out of these two dogs when you can just be friends with them? Aww. Now, remind me what the term RPG actually means. Role-playing game. In a typical RPG, you will kill enemy after enemy with a predetermined goal in mind, and yeah, sure, for the narrative purposes, enemies you fight might be really evil or did something bad to the main character or threatens the entire universe or something like that. But everyone is bad to someone, and Undertale shows you two sides of the same coin. At the end of the day, you are playing the role of someone who is simply attempting to achieve their goals through violence with a good purpose in mind, most of the time. But in Undertale, you drop in the world with no given purpose or destination, and it's up to the player to decide what they want to do with the characters they meet and the world they are currently interacting with. Ultimately, you are playing a role in the story that you decide for yourself, and it's a cool twist in an RPG that I haven't seen done very often. And yes, I know, please do not say this in my comments, I know Undertale isn't the first RPG to change up the formula in this way, but this is an Undertale video, so who cares? If you play the pacifist run of the game, you have to go out of your way not to hurt anyone you meet in favor of simply befriending them, and in the long run, this has a positive effect to the world they live in. The pacifist run is a lot more lighthearted and upbeat, not to mention this run is also the playthrough of the game where you get to know the characters as individuals and what these characters' roles are in the story, or at least what they tell you about themselves. And that is one of Undertale's greatest strengths. The characters you meet in this world aren't framed as enemies that should just die for XP, but as individuals with their own personalities and goals. One of the genius aspects of Undertale is making these monsters feel human. In this story, humans are the monsters to the monsters that live under the feet of the humans. It's a pretty cool juxtaposition to the human-monster dynamic, and as you get to spend more time with these characters, you get to learn about how the presence of the humans has affected their lives, which allows us, the player, to sympathize with them, as well as writing them in a way where they all have relatable flaws and insecurities with tangible goals that they want to reach. The entire point of the game is for you, the only human in the underworld full of monsters, to go back to the surface of the earth, to go back to humanity. But by the end of the game, you've developed such a connection to these characters that you'd probably prefer to stay in the underworld with the friends you've made down there. Now imagine this timeline. You're back at the start of the game, but now you have to murder all of the characters you've made relationships with, you've gotten to learn their motivations and what they strive to be, and you have to be the one that takes that away from them. It's a very depressing and cold contrast to the uplifting, lighthearted tone of the pacifist run. Of course, naturally, when you take this route, it shows you a completely different side of some of these characters, and for others, it just reminds you of what you already know about them, assuming you played the pacifist route first, that is. Even when you have zero intention of ever being friends with these characters in this timeline, they still show faith in you despite fully knowing the evil deeds you've done, and it's heartbreaking. The game completely changes tone when you do the genocide run, which gives the player perspective about how their actions completely changes the timeline of events and how you as the player experience the game. Not every character is going to show you good faith though. Like I said, we only get to know what these characters tell us about themselves, and there's no better example of this than Sans. Come on, this is an Undertale video. How am I not going to talk about Sans? Just a little bit. When you first meet Sans, it's very clear he has no real intention of hurting you, and he's perfectly fine with being friends with you even. But only because he promised someone else that he would protect you. But if he didn't, when you're getting to know him, he mostly just jokes around with you, but he lets you know right away that there's a very serious side of him that you'd preferably not want to mess with. He also exhibits weird behaviors that you don't see in other characters. He clearly stands out from the rest of the cast, and the game teases you that there's much more to Sans than meets the eye. The game constantly messes around with the multiverse theory and shows you some characters like Sans and Flowey are fully aware that they're in a video game and can manipulate the game itself however they please. The most obvious example of this, of course, is when you fight Flowey and he proceeds to kick you out of the game during the fight, and when you go back to the game, he then proceeds to abuse the game's save states to kill you and revive you over and over and over again. And this right here is the key to Undertale and Deltarune's impact, not only as a video game but as a piece of pop culture that has continually changed the internet and thus our generation in a lot of ways. This series really does have multiple universes, and each playthrough of Undertale itself is a different timeline, even down to how the game itself functions.
Whether or not the gray NPCs show up is based on a weird stat programmed into the code called the fun value. Basically, whenever you start a new game, Undertale picks a random number between 1 and 100. Depending on what number you get, different things happen in the game. These gray NPCs show up when the fun value is at 61, 62, 63, or higher than 90. And even if the number is there, they only have a 20% chance of showing up per game, which is why your chances of ever even seeing them is so low.
I'm sorry I used this as an example because I know how the fans feel about matpat, but he explained it better than I could, okay? Whatever, the point is that this opened the door for the fans to get as creative as they wanted with their own interpretations of the characters, the game, the world, and just about everything surrounding it. Toby Fox did a really smart move by just allowing the fans to do whatever they wanted with it, which is probably the best way to let a game like this grow and continue to have relevance. Look, you can say whatever you want about the Undertale fandom, but one thing you can't deny is that Undertale has one of the most dedicated and creative fan bases I've seen for any video game ever. I mean, just Sans alone is proof of this. Sans and his theme song Megalovania have pretty much transcended past just being a fictional piece of work to their own entities in and of themselves, honestly. Sans himself has about 1 million different interpretations which themselves have their own fan bases, and Megalovania itself has well over 82 million views on YouTube. Hell, even different versions of Sans and his remixes of his song like Insanity Sans has 7.9 million views on YouTube as well. If that doesn't say how impactful this game was, then I don't know what will. Well, one of the main things about the internet that allows games like this to stay relevant is memes and a very witty sense of humor. Yeah, I know humor is subjective and Toby Fox's writing style may not be for everyone, but I feel like Toby Fox's snappy and I guess memeable sense of humor has affected our taste in humor and what we find funny in memes and other pieces of media too. We also know that one of the main things that can stick with a player long after they play a game is some good ass music, and Undertale has plenty of that. I don't think there's any real denying of Undertale's soundtrack being one of the most impactful and one of the most popular soundtracks of recent history. At least for a video game anyways. Deltarune itself has also been just as popular and impactful as Undertale, and it only has 2 chapters of the full game released to the public, so if that's any indication at all, Deltarune could very well exceed Undertale in all of those things by the time the full game comes out in like 2030 probably. Granted, Deltarune is only as popular as it is because of the success of Undertale, but the fact that we waited almost 4 years for a second chapter for Deltarune and people were still happy with the outcome speaks volumes about how high the anticipation is for the sequel, follow-up, for the second game in the series really is. And hey, after an amazing game like Undertale, how could it not be?